Wow, I just said comic book fans. I got two YouTube shows, guys. What's up, horror fans? Pete here from the Lassercast, where me and my very good friend Danny, rocking the Carrie t-shirt over there, discuss all.
And hell.
There you go. We discuss all the horror movies and streaming shows that are out there right now, as well as some of the classics. Right now, we are talking about a brand spanking new movie that we are finally able to talk about as of January 24th, The Seeding. Now, Danny, you brought The Seeding to us, didn't you?
Yeah, I didn't. I got a screener of it. There. I don't know if I'm supposed to like name drop people, but like there are people who I am acquaintances with who, hey, if you are reviewing horror movies and you want a link, check out this new movie coming out. And I usually take that person up on their requests because we've seen several of that person's films and we typically agree with their taste in movies.
Yes.
So I took the screener link for The Seeding, shared it with you, and I'm very happy at thinking that we both really like this movie. So again, this is like us doing this channel now for 3 years, basically 2020, right? So 2020, 21, 22, 3.5 years.
Yes.
I feel like I have a good idea of your tastes.
Yeah.
And this screamed Pete movie. Namely because, and let's just, before I finish that sentence, this movie is coming out on VOD tomorrow, Friday, January 26th. So we won't, I guess we are going to probably get into some spoilers a little bit later, but we'll give you a very fair spoiler warning. In the first part of the video, we will try to remain spoiler free. We'll talk about the plot without giving away plot details.
Yeah.
I happen to know from doing this channel with you for 3.5 years that one of your favorite horror films is Alexander Aja's remake of The Hills Have Eyes.
Yes. And so this movie was written and directed by Barnaby Clay. And one of the cool things about the screener is that you get a little introduction by him, right? And I referenced it in my Letterboxd review of The Seeding. In that introduction, he talks about how there's basically two types of horror that he feels The Seeding fits into, right? He says there's environmental horror, and then there is psychological horror. And he did this. He said it was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Rosemary's Baby, and then also Lord of the Flies, the 1963 version, right? But wouldn't you kind of lump The Hills Have Eyes and the remake into that category too?
Oh, yeah. I also wrote down some movies that it reminded me of were Eden Lake, which, if you've never seen Eden Lake, there are few movies more brutal. That's an early Michael Fassbender movie.
Oh, okay.
There's a French horror film called Them.
Yes.
There's a very big part of this movie that reminded me of that.
Totally agree.
And then there are one of our favorite type of movies. This had a lot of folk horror elements to it as well. There were parts of this that reminded me of Midsommar. There were parts of this that reminded me of The Wicker Man. And I want to just say, and this is tremendous kudos to Barnaby Clay, who wrote and directed this. This movie reminded me of all of those movies without feeling derivative or ripping off of those movies.
Yes.
I feel like you don't have to rewrite the book every single time to come up with an original story.
Agreed.
And so to describe the movie, guy, photographer, goes out into the desert to take pictures, finds a ladder, ends up getting stuck in what is effectively a cavern.
Yeah.
because the next morning the ladder is gone and he
Yeah.
can't get back up. So now he's stuck in this cavern where there is a house where a woman lives,
Yeah.
and that could take you and remind you of a whole bunch of different things. But this movie felt very original while also reminding me of several other movies. I always think about Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water, where he basically said the creature from the Black Lagoon exists, but what if it was a love story during the Cold War?
Right.
And it's a completely different movie, and you know, coming from that one idea.
Yeah.
And I feel like Barnaby Clay did a great job of taking these influences that he had and crafting something that felt really original.
Yeah.
And the more this movie went, the more I liked it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he referenced, a whole bunch of movies because the other type of movie that he felt it fit into was environmental horror. And so in his introduction, he says it's a hybrid of two genres I love: environmental slash elemental thrillers like Picnic at Hanging Rock, Deliverance, and Walkabout, where the landscape becomes as threatening as its inhabitants. So I've actually not seen any of those three movies. I'm guessing you've probably seen all of those three movies.
No, I've seen Picnic at Hanging Rock, although that was, God, a long time ago. And I did see Deliverance, which is brutal. Again, there's nothing joyous about this movie. It's
Yeah.
a brutal horror film. But again, like you mentioned those, and I could totally see what he means by environmental horror. And because, and the cinematography in this film is great, but the setting of this movie becomes a character.
Yes.
This is a movie that is very sparse on characters. There's two main characters. There's this lead guy who, do they ever say his name in the movie?
I don't think so. No.
Well, the actor is Scott Hayes.
Yeah.
And Caitlin Scheel, who plays the woman or the mother in this film. She's the one that lives in the house in this canyon.
Yeah.
And there are other human characters, but they're not in the movie enough, or they're not like big enough characters. So really it's these two people and this just incredible setting for a movie. And the cinematography is great. The way that the film makes this area seem kind of expansive, while at the same time incredibly claustrophobic. And the movie also messes with time by showing you harvest moon, blue moon, shepherd moon, or whatever. And it's like, oh, these are like months going by. Like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And it really does mess with you a lot. So you do have that environmental and that psychological thing, because it took me a little bit to realize, oh shit, this is time passing. This is, this is not just I'm stuck in this place and, the sun went down, so it's the next day. It's like, oh, okay. It messed with my head a little bit while taking tremendous advantage of its geographic location.
Yeah.
Where was this film? Do you remember? I think it was Utah.
Well, that's a good question. I don't know where it was filmed. It's probably in the press release, but I do know that Barnaby Clay, when he was writing that introduction, he said that he was walking by the Joshua Tree area in California, and I'm assuming that this kind of resembles it in some way. He was walking around that area with his wife, who was pregnant at the time. And when you see this movie, you can kind of get the, okay, that makes sense, right? Based on that. It's funny because you were talking about time jumping around. We're kind of talking about some mild spoilers here. One spoiler that's kind of important to the plot, but it's kind of a mild spoiler, is that he essentially climbs into this canyon because there's a ladder, and then the ladder is gone, and he's essentially just trapped in there.
Well, he does. So what? The movie starts. He's a photographer. He's taking pictures. There's an eclipse that day, and he sees a random kid walking around the middle of the desert. The kid goes, I lost my parents. So he follows the kid, trying to help him out. The kid acts like a total asshole to him. So, like, you start to think maybe something's up here. And
Right.
he ends up kind of lost. And he sees this cavern and he looks down and he hears a woman singing. And there's a woman down in this cavern who appears to live in this, like, you know, small, tiny, like, shack-like home in the middle of the cavern. And he sees a ladder and he's like, all right, well, let me climb down and see if this woman can, like, help me get back. And
Yeah.
she's like, no, well, you know, it's late. Why don't you spend the night and you can leave in the morning? And then when he wakes up in the morning, the ladder he climbed down is gone. Or the ladder that he to take him to the other ladder is gone. So he's basically stuck now in this canyon.
Yes. And it's crazy because you'd think, okay, well, he could just climb up somehow. But they show him attempting that. It's just not possible. What I liked about that so much was this literally could just be in California, right? This could be in many locations in the United States where, like, even though there's probably just a couple of miles away is civilization. There's probably a highway, a McDonald's. There's probably something very close to him, but he's just trapped in this canyon and no one can hear him. Yeah.
A couple of years ago during our February break, my family and I went out to Hollywood and we stayed a 5-minute walk from Hollywood Boulevard.
Yeah.
And there were mornings where I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning and I walked past, like, Hollywood Boulevard and Mann's Chinese Theater to find the entrance to Runyon Canyon. And I would hike in Runyon Canyon. And you get into this canyon and you're following the trails and you can see Los Angeles from afar. But it's 6:30 in the morning and I did some pretty stupid things. I, like, did some jumps that I probably shouldn't have done. And, you know, I wasn't in the best of shape. And I said, I could probably make it up this, you know, hill. And had I fallen, there wasn't cell service. And, like, had I fallen and something gone wrong, like, I might have been, like, you know, lost in the fucking woods and lost in the canyon, you know, 10 minutes from my hotel and 10 minutes from Mann's Chinese Theater on Hollywood Boulevard. So, like, I totally get that idea of, like, you're so close to civilization, but.
Yeah. It's, you know, it's funny because this movie, like, slight spoilers here too, it's essentially like 127 hours meets Misery. That's kind of the way to think of it, right?
Yeah.
And so I like this idea, and I wrote this. I actually am kind of proud of the review that I wrote on Letterboxd because I took basically what, you know, Clay said, and Barnaby Clay said, and basically I was like, okay, well, it makes a lot of sense. He talks about how birth is just as brutal as death, right? And he's talking about how he was inspired by his wife's pregnancy. Like, when you have this kind of scenario where you have these two characters trapped in a small area, it is kind of similar to when you have someone that's pregnant. Like, it's like you're together now, you're the duo. And I think that this movie really captures that feeling. It's got that feeling of the environment could kill you. There's not enough to survive off of out there. You know, you're very lucky to have shelter, lucky to have water. But then also you don't really know who you're dealing with, right? And when you're dealing with a pregnant person, you as a father, your emotions are running wild. The mother's emotions are running wild. So you don't really know what's going to happen, right? And there's this sense of inevitability with a pregnancy, just like there's a sense of inevitability with this movie. Like, pretty much just seeing the main character walking around by himself in the woods, I was like, okay, well, this guy's going to fucking die, right? And he runs into this kid and, like, okay, this kid's going to lead him to his death. And the movie just essentially plays with that feeling for its entire runtime.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely. There is a sense of inevitability, but Clay does really good job in his, like, script and the way he tells the story of making it seem like there are spots of hope.
Right.
Like, they toy with the idea that the longer they're stuck in this canyon, maybe this is going to become a love story.
Right.
And there's a romantic vibe to it for a few scenes.
Yeah.
And then there's a tragic element to it, and then there's, and then it's like the movie keeps kind of bouncing around of like, what kind of horror movie do I want to be? And that is not to its detriment. It does that really well, and it keeps the audience guessing.
Yeah.
I almost don't know how to talk about more of this movie without spoiling it. So like,
I got it. I got a way to do that.
Okay, go.
Let's talk about the actors for a second and how important their performance is. So Scott Hayes plays Wyndham Stone, right? We talked about in our review, our best of 2023 list, our top 10, that when you're talking about a movie called Brooklyn 40, what the fuck? Brooklyn 45, right? Yeah, thank you. Brooklyn 45, when you have this like small one set kind of movie, you're really just basing it on the actors' performances, and they have to be really good actors. This movie, even though it's outside essentially for the most part, it's just two people because they're trapped outside in this area. You were talking about before how you don't really know which way it's going to go. When you see a person kind of walk into their doom in a horror movie, you kind of automatically assume they're stupid. You kind of think, okay, well, this person's an idiot. Like they're walking into their doom. Common sense would make them go in the opposite direction. But with Wyndham Stone, the character played by Scott Hayes, he's actually a very intelligent guy. I mean, when we first see him, he's like looking at an eclipse, and he's got like a telescope, or I think he's got a camera.
Yeah,
and then
he's a photographer.
Right. And so he's he makes a bunch of comments throughout the movie that show his intelligence. Then besides that, the way that he responds to Alina, you kind of have the expected response that you see from watching so many horror movies, and then you have what kind of happens in this movie. In horror movies, a lot of times it'll be like he's like unsuspecting and silly and gullible, and he just kind of believes whatever she says until it's the Wicker Man, and there's the fucking Wicker Man in front of you. Or it's like he distrusts her and he's mean to her and abusive. And there's bits of that throughout the movie.
Yeah.
But then there's like more where you can tell he's like thinking this out. He's trying to decide, what am I doing here? What's the best way to go about this?
There's a scene at the beginning where he's down in the canyon, and it's now the next morning, and he wakes up and he's like, and it's almost like this. I don't want to say we've all been in this situation, but there is a stereotypical like situation of like the guy who has a one night stand and then wakes up in the morning and is like, I gotta get the fuck out of here before she wakes up, right?
Right.
And there is no sex scene in the movie. Is there? Did I miss that? No. Wait.
Well, spoilers, there is a sex scene in the movie. It's kind of out of focus between the two. Yeah.
Then I was going to say, I thought that might have just happened off screen because
it's kind of blurry and out of focus, but there's people thrusting,
Okay.
Well,
there's a scene earlier in the movie. It's like literally the first night, and he's like, I'm only going to sleep here because I'm freaking lost. I climbed down this ladder because I saw another human being, and I didn't want to be alone in the wilderness in the middle of the night. So he wakes up and he's like, all right, I gotta get the fuck out of here. And he realizes very quickly the ladder's gone. He like stops to take some more pictures. He notices that there's like some almost murals around this cavern, suggesting that it's been there for a while and that there's people who have made these murals. And you start to hear like a noise, and you find I thought this was so funny that she's like trying to put like a roof on the top of like this shack, and she's struggling, and she's obviously struggling. And it's like, now as a guy, as a man, you're expecting, okay, he's now going to help her. He's going to be chivalrous and help her out. And he's just like, yeah, hey, the ladder, where's the ladder? And she's like, I can't, it's hard
Right.
to do. And he's like, yeah, the ladder, where's the ladder? And it's like, finally, he like takes a step back and he's like, oh, fine. And like, he goes and helps her, but like, not out of like, I need to be a chivalrous man, out of like, oh my God, you're not paying attention to me while I'm in need. I need to just fucking do this so that you will pay attention to me.
Right.
And like, he really kind of, Scott Hayes, the actor, he kind of comes across as an asshole at the beginning of this movie. Like, yes, he wants to help this kid.
Yeah.
But he's also like, he's got a line where he's like, all right, you know what? If you're not gonna like listen to me, if you're not gonna follow my directions and you're gonna drink my water, like, all right, fuck it, you're on your own, kid.
Right.
And like he wants to get out of this canyon, but he's like, and he's like, I don't really want to help this woman like re-roof her shack. Like, it's enough of this nonsense.
Right.
And like his acting throughout the movie goes through a lot of different phases. Same thing with Caitlin Scheel. Her performance also goes through like phases as well. Like, she's welcoming, she's motherly, she's like, there's a moment of like, this could be a romance. There's a moment of this could be like Midsummer, where she's spiking this guy's drink to do what she needs to do to him. And there, so I think, considering it was such a small cast, both of the leads do a really good job of like pulling you into these two characters.
100%. Yeah. It's weird because Scott Hayes in this movie, he's kind of like two roles, right? He's like the horror victim that's fallen into a trap and you're just waiting for the inevitable. But then he's also like the audience surrogate, where the audience would be like, come on, like, let's get the fuck out of here. Like, you should be worrying about this. So he kind of bounces back and forth between those two. Now, before we talk about Caitlin Scheel as Alina in more depth, I just wanted to point out that like Scott Hayes goes through some shit in this movie. Like he suffers throughout this movie. When you're watching it, like it's not over the top. His acting, he's good at it. Like, you feel for him, you feel his annoyance, and then you feel for him when he's suffering too. You want him to get out of it. Whereas in other horror movies, you might be like, well, this person's a fucking idiot. They deserve whatever's coming to them. Now, with Alina, you've already kind of said that she sort of, kind of bounces back and forth with what she could be. We don't really ever like know truly her motivation. There's what happens at the end, and it's sort of like, well, this was always going to happen. But she kind of goes back and forth from not talking at all and like working in that house to like talking to him. Occasionally she'll say like kind of like random weird gibberish stuff in anger. She definitely seems like she's devoted to some kind of force within this canyon. But it's hard to get like a beat on her. And I think that also requires skill too, but because if you're going to have a character that is like, you can't tell, are they a victim here? Are they evil? And like, it's not truly concrete if like this person is a victim or they're evil. Maybe it's a combination of both,
Yeah.
So that brings us up to now. I think we could say at this point we're 24 minutes in. Let's say that we're getting into spoiler territory too. And
All right. So from this point on, we are going to talk about spoilers. If you stuck with us this long, don't watch the rest until you go and watch the movie tomorrow when it goes up on VOD. So yeah, good, nice cut for spoiler warning, and now you can.
Yes. So I got a little banner on the bottom: murderous teens. So this movie, we've already kind of referenced The Wicker Man, we've referenced Midsummer, we've referenced Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That psychological horror, when I wrote my review, the key thing there is it's people that are deranged in some way doing horrible things to innocent people. That's the type of psychological horror this is, and this fits within that mold. You know, we have these deranged people. You brought up the movie Them, and I was so happy you brought that up because Them has these fucking crazy teens that terrorize these people, and you know they're in a house for the most part. But in
Yeah.
this, they're always on the fringes.
I don't
He's-
know if I
But
don't know if Them was the direct inspiration for the Strangers.
right,
It,
right.
but it is. They are very similar. And if you have not seen Eden Lake, it's very, very similar. It's Michael Fassbender and his girlfriend they go out for like a romantic weekend in the woods, and they just start getting like attacked and tortured and like messed with by this like group of like angry kids who are just like fucking with them for fun. And it's very, very similar in that regard as well.
Yeah. And so with this movie, these kids, you kind of know right off the bat that they pretend to be like they're innocent, but it's like, you know, they're sort of horrible. They do horrible things. Since we're in spoiled territories, one of them, if there's a hard cut to this kid's dick at one point as he's pissing on Scott Hayes, who's trying to climb or is being pulled up a rope out of the cavern. You know, they are not as like grotesque or deranged looking as the mutants in The Hills Have Eyes, but they're definitely like cut from the same cloth. Like you could take any one of these kids and they could be like a background character with The Hills Have Eyes people.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Especially the original. Especially the original.
The original. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I mean, obviously in the remake, they're much more like nuclear created atomic mutants.
Right.
Whereas Craven's original, they're just like what's the word when family sleeps with family?
Like hillbillies?
Inbred.
Inbred.
They're like
inbred.
Yeah, they're like inbred cannibals.
Yeah. And by the way, if you guys have just been joining us for the first time, we have a review of the original Hills Have Eyes 2 on the Last Cast. Make sure you check that out. They're pretty despicable. You know, I knew that at one point they were going to fuck with the garden that Scott Hayes and Caitlin Shield were planting. There is one of these kids that seems to be like his potential salvation. Like it's a kid that seems like it could be innocent. And then what happens to that kid? You're like, oh, okay, I knew that was going to happen. It's just this like cruel nature. And the way that humans can get when they believe in some kind of twisted religion or they have some kind of twisted belief. It's really scary stuff. And I think that they're really disturbing in this.
Yeah. There's a couple, and this is what I love about the movie is the movie introduces you to all of these kids. There's a good number of them. There's more than 5. But you don't spend a lot of time seeing them up close. Most of the time they are viewed, and I love how you put it that Scott Hayes, what is his character's name?
Wyndham Stone. Uh-oh. Danny, I lost you. I hope you come back. I bet a telemarketer just called you. Wyndham Stone, they don't say his name in the movie. I'm going to keep going because there's a character on Twin Peaks called Wyndham Earl. Oh, there he is. Okay. Danny, I was just referencing Twin Peaks while you were gone, but it's okay.
Okay, well, hold on for that for another like 35 minutes, I think.
There you go. Right. Well, so what's the what was the point you were making though?
I asked you what Scott, the actor Scott Hayes, what's his character name? Because I don't think they ever really say it in the movie, or I missed it while I was watching it.
Right. In the press kit, it's Wyndham Stone.
Wyndham, yeah, that sounds like a friggin' WWE wrestler from like 1989.
There you go.
From Hulk Hogan's tag team partner, Wyndham Stone.
Right.
But yeah, so like you put it that Wyndham is our, like, we are like watching the movie through his eyes. Yeah. And so like a lot of the time we are in the canyon looking up, and we just see like this beautiful silhouette of these like standing children at the top of the line, like protecting the canyon, and like so you don't really get to see them. And then it's like there's the one kind of innocent kid who gets into like conversations with Wyndham about like, will you teach me this and this and that, and then he gets I mean, that is not let's just say the other kids don't take well to him being a kind soul.
Yeah.
And these are effectively, I mean, it is very Hills Have Eyes. I mean, they do there's that one random woman who comes by, she's killed. They're obviously killer children. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's a great shot of just like uh it almost feels kind of like post-apocalyptic in some way,
Yeah.
of like looking up and seeing like the doom bringers or who are here.
Yeah. Yeah. I figured we have pictures from the press kit. I might as well share them in our video, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And yeah, thank you to Magnolia Pictures for that. They're the production company for this film. But yeah, the kids all kind of have a mind of their own, and then it ties back to Alina, who seems at first, again, and this is where like the movie hooked me, because at first I'm like, did they trap her in there and she's been there her whole life? How long has she been there? Did the kids trap her, or is she with them in some way? And of course, we find out later on the true nature of this relationship as the film reaches its climax.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe we won't spoil that part.
Yeah,
But you've already kind of mentioned how the movie has this great cinematography. I think that like the choices that um, Barnaby Clay makes in this movie, like what he chooses to focus on, is very interesting. I wanted to kind of just show him for a second too, but there's a couple of shots you talked about, like time passing, and we don't really know what's happening. There's a couple of shots that are really interesting because they're essentially like slow motion shots of like super focused things. So like it might be like a spider web, or it might be an eclipse. We were talking about these murderous teens a second ago. There's this one really great shot when Scott Hayes is in a haze himself because I think he's hurt, and they show one of these kids in the house that he's in, and there's a veil, and the kid's behind the veil, and I was like, "Ooh, that's a really good shot of the kid behind the veil." So
there's
what do you call?
there's also a great shot of he's like knocked out, and it's very obvious that the kids have come down into the cavern and are like standing around him, and you're like, oh shit. And like he wakes up the next morning, and of course they're gone, and obviously the ladder that they had removed is they had put back to go down, now they took it away again. So yeah, I'm pretty sure, having looked at IMDb, that this is his first feature.
Yes, agreed. Yes, yes, yes.
And instantly this becomes a director that I'm interested in following career wise, because like this was such an intriguing movie to me.
Yeah.
And and the reality is, when we've done a bunch of these reviews for movies where we get advanced screeners for.
Yeah.
And going back to my days writing for Geeks of Doom, I would get advanced screeners a lot.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I would watch the movie and I'd be like, oh man, I don't want to say, I don't want to be mean. I don't want to like shit on somebody's work. So I'll make so back in the Stardust days, I would do like a Stardust video about the movie, and I would make it like, I would just be like as positive as I could be without, shitting on the film.
Yeah.
And I feel like that happens sometimes when you get screeners. Like, and
Yeah.
then you have to decide as a reviewer, am I going to cover this movie? Am I going to try to be nice about it? It is really friggin' refreshing when you get a screener for a movie that is great. And I
Yes.
genuinely think this was a great movie. Like, I really, really like this. I watched part of this at work.
Yeah.
Because
With your class, it was really weird,
yeah, it was really no. I had 2 periods off in a row, and I have an empty classroom. I'm like the only person who's in my classroom, so it really worked to my advantage. I was just like, all right, let me pop the screener on my laptop and watch it while I have 2 periods off in a row. And oh man, I was like my door was closed, the lights were off, and I was just like, oh shit, okay, like it's one of those movies where, I made this point when we were talking about our top 10 list last year with When Evil Lurks. If you can get me to audibly react to a movie, you're doing a really good job. And so I just really looking forward to seeing what Barnaby Clay does in the future.
Yeah.
This movie doesn't feel like it had a huge budget. I mean, there's no special effects. There's no like VFX shots. There's just really good cinematography, very small setting. I love horror movies that are located in that one isolated setting where there's not a lot of space to move around.
Right.
I think if you can succeed at making a good horror movie in a confined space, it's a testament to your ability to write characters well, to write dialogue well, and to not and for a movie like this where there isn't that much dialogue, to write the scenes well. So I
Yeah.
think he does all of that really well, and I'm just really excited to see what he does next.
Yeah, I mean, really good point. This is his first feature, like you said. But looking at the screener, it says that he's made music videos. He's directed music videos by like TV on the Radio, Gnarls Barkley, the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, Rihanna, and Depeche Mode. The thing that got me really excited was he actually collaborated with Mick Rock and David Bowie to rework the classic music video for Life on Mars. So that's if this guy worked with David Bowie at some point, I'm pretty impressed.
But also,
Yeah,
that is a trend that we have seen of music video people, directors who get their start in music videos and go into successful filmmaking. The most obvious is David Fincher,
right. Or
who
Michael Bay,
my yeah. I was thinking more in like the horror thriller
horror. Yeah,
category.
totally understand.
But like the idea of like being able to tell a story in a music video and taking that and expanding it into film, especially in this case where he wrote and directed it, it's it's not. I feel like there might have been a time where somebody was like, "Oh, who horror movie? This guy only did music videos," and
Right.
now it's like, "Oh shit! Look at the music videos they directed."
Yes, yes. So I mean, we'll keep our eyes. He'll be on our radar moving forward. As we kind of wrap this up, I just wanted to say that, like, when you ask what was the movie about, it really is about having to be in an environment with someone that you don't know, you don't trust, you don't know how they're going to react, and you're basically trapped there with them. And in other movies, it's made very clear right off the bat that the person is dangerous in some way because, like, maybe they're keeping you from escaping. Maybe you're in the house with them and they have a weapon holding you. But because of the canyon, he can't escape, right? And so I really like the ambiguity of, is Alina a victim trapped there with him, or is she in on the whole thing? I think that, like, Scott Hayes has this one really great line in the movie where he talks about a microcosm, because he knows about science to some extent, and he says, a microcosm is basically like a small example of the greater world outside. And I think that Bernard Clay put that in there because this movie is sort of a microcosm where it's like this small world where the madness of certain people that don't know any better or have been raised this way, they can really hurt innocent people. At least that's how I'm interpreting it. There's the cold open for this movie, which we haven't even mentioned. The cold open of this movie is really great too, where it's like a kid who's probably like, I don't know, not even a year old, walking around in a very dirty diaper, and the kid looks dirty, and it has something in its mouth. And then when you close up, it's a fucking finger, a severed finger. Oh, and there goes Danny again with the telemarketers. He's flickering in and out. I think the little kid with the severed finger got him. There you are. So,
Okay.
what do you think got cold open?
Yeah, it's ominous without giving away anything, which I liked.
Right.
And to me, that's the key to any cold open, is to just make you more interested in watching the film.
Exactly.
And that did it for me. Like, I don't need a lot in a cold open. So, I don't need, some horror movies decide they're going to do they're going to be like experimental and do like a 10 to 15 minute cold open. And
right.
Yeah. And you're like, whoa, I forgot this movie didn't even have credits yet.
Right.
But no, this was really, really good at just setting a tone.
Right. It's funny because Breaking Bad has a very similar look to it. And like it obviously has a very similar environment to this movie. And Breaking Bad was very good at having these cold opens where you're watching it, and for a little while you're like, what the fuck am I looking at?
Yeah.
And then right at the end, you're like, oh shit, it's this. And that's exactly what this cold open reminds me of. There's this one part I wanted to bring up that doesn't really kind of go along with what we're discussing, but it's in the movie. There's a part where I keep calling him Scott Hayes, but like Wyndham, he's trapped, and he pulls out his wallet at one point and looks at his license, and then he looks at his work ID, like the badge that scans to get you inside. And I really liked that scene because, as I say every fucking time, or almost every time on the show, like, I hate exposition dumps. I hate when you have to kind of explain something, right? Show, don't tell. And I think that was a great scene because it's basically showing like his name, and then it's showing the type of job that he had. And he's not sitting there talking to Alina like, oh, I work at this job. There's nothing like that. And you think to yourself, well, why is this guy looking at his ID? And it's just basically because he's just trapped in this fucking space with nothing to do. I fucking would pull out my ID too. I'd probably pull out my Applebee's gift card and be like, this is really fucking interesting today.
Yeah. No, I agree.
You appreciate the Applebee's gift card, Danny? It has significance for us, man.
It does, especially if it's the Highland Boulevard one in Staten Island. Yes.
There you go. So, any closing thoughts for this awesome movie?
I'm just really excited for 2024 when we still have a week left in January. And I've seen 2 horror movies now that are contenders to make my top 10 list. That almost never happens in January. I've also seen 2 horror movies that, if we did worst of the year lists, which we don't, might end up on that list. And that's just far more likely for January. Right. You usually get these like theater dumps, or you get these, the studio held them out of like the holiday season, and now they just got to dump them out when nobody's going to the movies, or so, hey, let's go see this because it's the only thing there.
Right.
And to get this and Destroy All Neighbors like a week apart from each other, our full review of that and my short review of that are up on our channel. It's rare. It's January 25th that we're recording this, and I have 2 movies that are likely candidates to at least be long listed for my top 10 list.
Yeah. I feel the exact same way. I haven't actually seen any bad movies, but you see way more movies than me. But the 2 that you said were good, I've watched for this show, and I'm really pleased so far, man. I'm pretty excited. And speaking of which, there's some awesome shows on right now, too. Danny, do you want to plug something that's coming up on our channel?
Well, you asked me if I was watching True Detective, and I said, well, I've never watched an episode of True Detective, Pete. And you said, well, you should watch season 4 because it's really kind of horror based.
Yes.
And I watched the first 2 episodes and loved them. And we decided that we're going to cover True Detective season 4 as our next streaming show that we cover on the Lassercast. So if you recognize our outfits, we are going to X out of this.
Yes.
And we're going to record our True Detective episodes 1 and 2 review to be posted later on, probably, I don't know, a couple days or something.
My goal is actually to get it out by tomorrow because I want it to be out before episode 3 comes out.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Perfect. Awesome.
And then here's a little weird little plug and shit too. True Detective is a show that feels like it should be a police procedural drama mystery show, but it also feels like it absolutely be a horror movie. Kind of reminds me of Yellow Jackets, where you think it's one type of show, but it could easily be a horror movie too. And I thought about Yellow Jackets when I watched this movie too, because it's that sort of that weird kind of culture that you build when you're in the middle of nowhere. And a lot of the times that culture is a brutal one. So last plug, if you like, just listen to me and Daddy talk about this kind of shit, you like this type of movie, check out our Yellow Jackets reviews too. So anyway.
So that goes back to like the folk horror stuff, because Yellow Jackets, when they're in the woods, and they believe in like these entities in the woods, that's very folk horror. And there's a lot of that here. Like I would, like I said, like this movie, like you hate exposition. So there is no deep discussion of the murals in this canyon.
Right.
But we get to look at them, and just by looking at them, we know somebody has painted these. They've been around for a long time. They probably have a deeper meaning to something very spiritual out in the middle of this desert canyon.
Yep.
So what the fuck is going on here? And it just adds to the intrigue of the story. And I think that's a good place to end it. I just really like this movie.
Yeah. Oh, I keep talking about it. I know we keep plugging shit, but actually one other thing I really loved too was menstrual blood. She uses menstrual blood to keep track of time and puts it on the wall. And there's always that association, that weird kind of like folky association with like the moon and menstrual blood, and then there's always these moon references. I don't know. This is a great movie, guys. If you haven't watched it, go check it out. And Danny and I are going to go and talk about True Detective. We'll see y'all next time. Oh, shit. I want to go hit leave studio. End stream. See y'all next time. There we go.